Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where in the world you are joining us from today. Hopefully it's not seat 3A on some flight across the country. I'm Diane Krakora, CEO of PartnerPath. Welcome to this week's Technology Channel videocast. And with me, I have my partner in crime, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene, how is the Best Coast?
It's doing great, although I'm in the bottom corner of the Best Coast this week. I'm in sunny Florida for business, but instead of cold, wintry New York. But we are doing great, and I don't have half the suntan that you do from your 3 days in Hawaii, so I guess I don't have much to brag about.
Yes, but we both were in warm places. I'm back in a little bit colder California, but one of the things we wanted to talk about this week is that as we started last week was the state of partnering study, right? We had 213 solution providers and 134 vendors respond to dozens of questions in our 2017 state of partnering study. This is the 11th year we've done it. And we had a webinar this week on some of the early findings from this. And we had Lynn Haber with Channel Partners, because they helped us collect some of the data for the study, not just because of that, but they did. And Leonard Ivantosh with Nimble Storage on as guests. And if you weren't able to attend, please go listen to the link. It was a really exciting and informative webinar, and particularly around, I'd say, 3 key pieces of data that we might talk about today: revenue, cloud, and then trends around partner types. So Charlene, I know that you always participate in our webinars. Any insights from that or thoughts from the webinar?
Well, first of all, I will say that I think you guys do an awesome partnering study. I mean, I think it probably reveals more about the channel from year to year than any other study that I see. So I just want to give you a little bit of, woot for that. So
well, thank you. You don't need to give us that much love, but I do appreciate it, and we work really hard at it. And the study will be out in its full entirety in about 10 days. We've finished some writing, we're doing some editing and some graphics. Very excited about some of the trends that come from it. And one of the things that we found is that in the revenue segment, that 1/3 of the vendor respondents had said that over 50% of their revenues were driven, not just simply fulfilled, but driven by partners from 2016 revenues.
That's a pretty amazing figure, and I have to wonder if they if it was if that number includes some revenues but not all revenues, or how exactly the vendors are categorizing that. It seems a little on the high side, and I know you said that Ivan had mentioned that he thought that maybe that number was a little padded, and I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it does seem a little high, and unless there's some sort of new accounting that I haven't been made aware of, I just don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's, for how many companies we talk to that say that they're channel-centric organizations, so it's only 1/3. So out of the 134 vendors, we're talking 40-something of them said that over 50% of their revenues were driven by partners. I actually would expect that it's only 50% of your revenues, and
Right.
it's, so I thought it's a fairly decent number if you're talking about, 1/3 of the vendor community has half of their revenues driven by partners. I mean, that could be, Cisco that has 82%. I mean, I think there's a lot of big companies in there that have a very channel centric, but.
Yeah, and there could be that number of companies that have no direct sales force, and so that they rely solely on the channel or through distribution to get their product out or to get their services out. So I think in that respect, yeah, probably that's probably a fair amount. I just think that 50% is that's a lot to for a lot of the companies to, put on their channel. I honestly don't know though. I think that I think it's highly probable. Sure. I mean, why not? Sure.
Why not? Well, the other cool thing that goes along with this revenue, in terms of, we could debate, is that enough, and do we, have a wider study that takes 120,000 vendors. But the other cool thing in this is that 75% of the vendors said that they expected the revenues driven by their partners to increase in 2017. So here's to more channel in 2017.
Yes. Yes. Just out of curiosity, were the survey results taken before or after the election?
They were after the election, actually.
Okay, so
yes, we collected this.
Both eyes open then.
They went in mid-November to mid-December.
Okay, all right. So I think this year is going to be a very interesting year for the channel, especially for the channel, because there are so many balls up in the air with the economy and with some of the legislation. I don't even want to call legislation, because like the Senate really don't have anything to do with it. It's
executive orders.
Executive orders, exactly. So I think I think that number is probably dead on, because I think that companies are going to kind of pull back on their hiring and their growth strategies, and really rely on the channel more to help them kind of be the success in 2017 that maybe otherwise they wouldn't be.
And the second piece of data, well, this would actually be the third, but is on the cloud. And 70% of vendors, okay, so only a third said that 50% of their revenues are coming from the channel, right, in the overall revenue number. Now, 70%, the other side of that, of the vendors indicated that less than 25% of their cloud revenues are driven by partners. So even if 50% of their revenues, their overall revenues, are driven by partners, only 25% of their cloud revenues are driven by partners, which I thought was really interesting.
So where's the other cloud revenue coming from? Is it coming from their direct sales force, do you think? That's what they're doing? Yeah, well, I think that's indicative of the fact that vendors really haven't figured out a cloud strategy for their channel partners. I think there's still a lot of confusion as far as who's responsible for what in the cloud space among vendors and their channel partners. And I think right now it's kind of the wild, wild west. Still, 3 years, 4 years down the road after the cloud has kind of become a sales model for the channels, people still can't figure out where cloud revenues live when it comes to the channel. And so I think again this year we're going to see some settling. I think finally, I think some parameters are really going to be set, and but again, a lot of that also depends on how far along the end user customers are with their cloud capabilities.
Yes, I can predict. I can put my little prediction hat on and say at the end of this year, when you, I, and Darren are doing our year-end wrap-up, we will still be talking cloud.
You think? I think we'll be talking cloud for a little while yet.
I think so. Even though in last year's wrap-up we said sooner or later we won't be talking cloud. Well, it won't be 2017. We will be talking a lot about cloud in 2017.
Yeah, it's going to be later rather than sooner. I think there are still too many unknowns basically, and still too many conflicts happening out there for us not to talk about cloud.
And the third piece of data we were going to share with you guys today, there's so much, I could go on forever, is something that Charlene and I have been talking about. Third person data. There's only three. Oh, you're right. It is fourth because I added the other one. It is four. She's holding up four. I'm like, what? Okay, so the fourth piece of data, there was two on revenue. So the fourth piece of data that we're going to share with you today is on something Charlene and I have been talking about pretty much every month for the last year, which is, what do partners call themselves? Well, we left them all in the bucket of solution provider and then asked them to, in terms of how do they classify themselves, and gave them 12 options. Surprising or not surprising enough is that they were able to choose more than one, and on average they did. They chose 2.5. That's not the piece of data that I was going to share. But the other piece is that, so there's 5 pieces of data. All right, kill me. I'm a data girl. So the other thing is that IT consultant came out number 1 for what the partners, the 213 solution providers in this study, wanted to classify themselves as. Now, in the webinar yesterday, we talked about, is that what they want to classify themselves as, or is that what they're truly doing? So there's some conversation around that. So IT consultant came out first, agent was second, MSP third, cloud service provider fourth, cloud solution provider. Let me be really clear on that. Cloud solution provider, because we had that discussion as well yesterday. Difference between cloud services and cloud solutions. They're not all doing data centers. And then 5th out of this list of 12 was reseller. That was interesting.
Well, okay, so you put them all under the umbrella of solution provider, though. So we have the conversation that you and I have had has been focused on whether they should be called solution provider, channel partner, reseller, and you kind of made that decision for them by calling them solution provider.
Yes, because so I have to call them something in this report, as I refer to them 17,000 times in 22 pages.
If you can't make the decision, we're going to make it for you. You are now solution providers. But so this is kind of like a subcategorization. And I think in that respect, I think IT consultant is totally on the mark, because if these guys are trying to evolve their business and they're trying to be that solutions-focused guru, if you will, for their customers, IT consultant fits the bill the best. Agent, to me, that harkens back to the telecom days when you're just basically reselling minutes, long distance minutes, or you're selling long distance or internet services or something like that. And then MSP, thank you. That's yeah. I mean, that's a subcategorization. It doesn't really evoke things beyond managed services. So I understand why they did that. That's the most encompassing title out of the the ones that they chose. Maybe there was something else in that list that I didn't see that maybe would have fit the bill better. Do you agree with those? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's really interesting that they are saying that, in terms of how they classify themselves is not as a reseller, but more as a IT consultant. So let's take off the ones in the middle, right? That said, are they an MSP, or that out of our solution provider ecosystem, that they are looking at themselves more as an IT consultant and making those recommendations and those services rather than reseller. And I think that is the big shift. And kind of the exciting news in terms of vendors that are watching this, how do you now start pandering, quite frankly, to that business model and that kind of classification?
Right. Well, I think now, because the solution providers see themselves that way, they are going to expect a lot more from their vendor partners in the way of new programs or reorganizations that really address that evolving solution provider persona.
So thank you for talking through these 5 pieces of data with me. Next week we'll do some more, but I promise like 1 or 2 pieces. I'm not going to overwhelm you guys all with so much data. I just love it, and I think it's really cool to give you some benchmarking and some trends to be able to start working into your partner program. So Charlene, thank you as always for bantering around some of the data with me.
Well, thank you, Diane, as always. It's a pleasure.
See you next week from sunny California and New York.
I'll be back in New York, yeah. Hopefully I won't be snowed in.
Bye, y'all.